We promised you Andy Brassel. But we've had a change of European football expert, and Dougie Critchley joins us. And frankly, it's his attitude and application and ability to pick up the phone and answer an email quickly, which is one of the many reasons that I rate the man in your picture right now. Dougie, great to have you with us on Total Football. Thank you so much. How surprised are you by this appointment?
Well, I think maybe like myself, it's a little bit left field for this appointment, a bit of a last minute. No, I'm only joking. It's an interesting appointment from Spurs. I don't think many people necessarily saw it coming. Of course, Fabio Paratici, who has been at the club, although isn't currently at the club, has experience with Juventus over the last few years. Igor Tudor did a pretty solid job picking up at the end of last season, securing Champions League football for Juventus, just 1 point ahead of Roma. Prior to that with Lazio, nearly made the Coppa Italia final before losing to Juventus in that semi-final. So he's been in really intense environments. Juventus, the most successful club domestically in Italian football history. Lazio, it's a very, very hot-headed environment at points. That rivalry with Roma, absolutely massive. He'll need that experience going into that North London derby the weekend after this. And then at Marseille, he led them to their best points tally of the last 7 years. This is the 6th country that he's managed in. He's never lasted more than 78 games at a single club. But as Bridgie points out, it's not really about the long term. This is short term, get Spurs away from this relegation battle. They're only 5 points clear as it stands. And Igor Tudor has experience with steadying ships and righting seasons.
And big clubs with big stadiums like Juve, like Lazio, like that Stade Velodrome for Marseille. But there's no English club on his CV, Dougie. Is that a concern?
From what I've read and the interviews that I've seen, he's got very good English, which will be, absolutely essential to get his message across to the players. So that is a slight worry, I would say, as well. But when you have so much experience and as a player as well with Croatia, a number of caps there as well, I think the players will respect him. And coming in off back of a pretty disastrous spell from Thomas Frank, where he was, much talked about in terms of the next cab off the rank in terms of getting a job at a big club, and it never quite worked. And supposedly the players reportedly didn't really necessarily believe in his methods by the end, and maybe thought he was a little bit too negative and maybe showed a little too much credit and kindness to rivals, not least complimenting Arsenal so much in the build-up to their humbling when Eze scored that hat-trick. So if Igor Tudor goes in with the right attitude, what is also quite interesting is that in the vast majority of his jobs, he's played 5 at the back, which is a system that Thomas Frank kind of reverted to in his final few weeks, and was a system that a lot of Spurs fans were calling for, given that they do have a number of very high quality centre-backs. But as Bridgie points out as well, it's going to be difficult for any manager with the amount of absentees. Solanke, Kulusevski and Maddison between them this season started just 4 league games. So I do have a certain amount of sympathy for Thomas Frank, but Igor Tudor comes in with it all on the line, really. It's unthinkable that Spurs, having won the Europa League last year, could be relegated down to the Championship. The 3 previous winners of the Europa League amongst English sides this century have all finished in the top 3 and used it as a springboard for success. Spurs, it's been quite the opposite.
Dougie, you mentioned the formation, because I'm really interested to see. He's only got probably about 11, 12 senior first-team players when he goes to training on Monday. But when Romero is back, where do you see 3 centre-halves maybe with Romero, Van der Ven on that left centre? Then left back, Destiny Udogi's out for 4 weeks. Pedro Porro will probably come into that side on the right. Can you think of the 11? João Paulinho, what influence would he have?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, Christian Romero in his Atalanta days played in that central defensive role at Atalanta in the middle of a back 3 and used that aggression that he has in his game, which came a little bit too far during that game against Man United, to step out of defence and make interjections and clean up the ball and then drive forward. It feels like a system that would also suit Mickey van der Ven, and the fact that he's potentially a much better driver with the ball from deep than necessarily a natural passer. Destiny Udogi, who, as you mentioned, is injured, but has played this system in the past at Udinese. Pedro Porro, I think most Spurs fans would probably say at his best, which he hasn't been this season, is a much better attacking player than necessarily a defender, where he is prone to lapses in concentration. Xavi Simons has played in a 3 at the back system at RB Leipzig, and one of those inverted sort of number 10 roles would suit him really well. And after a really difficult start to the season, he's really built into the campaign over the last few weeks as well. Dominic Solanke, I think, has got a skill set that could bring a number of different players into play in a 5 at the back system as well. So the ingredients are there. It's just there aren't that many ingredients. They are so short on numbers as it stands. The good thing is that they are coming up against an Arsenal side that would have played again in the FA Cup this weekend, whereas Spurs have a long break, so Igor Tudor can get to the training ground. And after a campaign that has seen them play so much football already, most English sides that have been in Europe, such busy schedules, there's been very little time on the training ground to get Thomas Frank's ideas across. Igor Tudor has a nice, clean break up until that North London derby.
So I guess, Dougie, if we're making a link to his experience within Italian football, this is more sort of margarita pizza football, with your basic ingredients in it, your tomato and your cheese on the base, then it's going to be anything too kind of arty or sophisticated. But I actually just sort of wonder, look, related to the tactics, the personnel, right? What's more important for Igor Tudor now? To try and fit tactics to the existing personnel in this injury-ravaged Tottenham Hotspur squad, or is it his man management skills to motivate those fit players he does have?
I think a little bit of both. I think it's a good question, though. I think, the fact that Frank has used this system that he's most likely to use in the last few weeks, that should necessarily help. But for me, it's been laxes in concentration. It's been a lack of leadership. I think it's far too easy to just lay all the blame at the board or Thomas Frank for Spurs' current situation. Results, particularly in the league, and you might say that they were focusing on the Europa League last year, weren't a lot better under Ange Postecoglou. There's been a number of different managers with various levels of experience. Some, Antonio Conte, who won the league last year with Napoli. He's involved in another title challenge this year. There's Jose Mourinho, a serial winner. So many different managers of different philosophies, of different CVs and credibility have all struggled at Spurs. So it's a big ask for Igor Tudor to come in and oversee a massive upturn in results instantly. But the good thing for him is that the bar is quite low, and results, given the fact that Forest and West Ham have dropped points where they potentially could have won in the last few weeks. Forest having 35 shots against Wolves earlier this week, drawing that game. West Ham throwing away that lead against Chelsea. Things could have been even tighter for Igor Tudor arriving right now. There is that buffer. And to be honest, you look at the playing quality in that Spurs squad, and I do expect them to pull away from relegation. So hopefully with Igor Tudor at the helm, he can oversee a quick upturn in results, because they certainly need to.
I'm not going to mention names, but I think a few players might need a rocket up them. Is Igor Tudor that kind of head coach? Because I don't think a lot of the players I don't think they really related massively to Thomas Frank, whereas I think they loved...
He was too nice, supposedly, wasn't he? That's the thing, he's a lovely guy, but...
Oh, he is, but
yeah. To command authority in the dressing room,
possibly.
Richie.
I mean,
to command authority.
He'll disagree with us totally, but there was something not right there. 2 players, or 3, wished him well. And I'm sorry, but you do have to look at things like that now in this day and age. Will Igor Tudor grab Romero, for example, say, stop getting sent off, you're our captain? Just Romero as one example. Kolo Muani, there's one. That's the key, isn't it, Dougie? Because there's a good player there, but Spurs fans have only seen it once or twice this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his level of performance has been really disappointing. I think, given the expectations when he arrived at PSG from Eintracht Frankfurt for 90 million euros a few seasons ago, and yes, he didn't really get an opportunity at PSG. They signed so many forwards at a similar time, then goes on loan to Juventus, and now is at Spurs. Haven't seen enough of him, aside from a couple of games, particularly against PSG, where he actually played pretty well. Odegaard has shown glimpses this season as well, but Spurs' signings over the last few years, as you know only too well, Archie Gray, Bergvall, Tell, really high promising players, but there's a lack of experience in this squad, there's a lack of leadership. You say about giving a rocket to Romero, I'd also probably take away his phone as well. I don't think any social media announcements are what the squad need right now. It needs to be knuckling down, getting on with business. And Igor Tudor, from what I've heard, is a much more relaxed character and quite a chilled sort of persona, maybe a little bit more detached in a sort of Ange Postecoglou style, rather than the arm around the shoulder that Thomas Frank did, and seemed, as David sort of said or intonated, to maybe a little too nice for the role. But huge ask for him, but he does have experience, as I say, at Juventus, at Lazio, of getting an instant upturn in results. And I don't think he'll mind the fact that he's got, 12 games or so up until the end of the season, and then see what happens from there.
We were chatting earlier, Dougie, to Patrick Kendrick, who's an Italian football expert joining us on Total Football, and he was saying that actually he's not afraid to use his voice, not just in the scenario of the dressing room and being that figure of authority and leadership amongst the players, but also to the board, to the hierarchy. And there was a situation where at the end of the season, having got Juve back into the Champions League places and finishing there, that they were not sure what to do with Igor Tudor, whether to give him the job full-time. And what he did was give them an ultimatum and say, look, I'll only lead this team to the Club World Cup and do that if you give me the job full-time. Now, ultimately, it didn't work out, but he got what he wanted. Do you think that might be a little bit of a concern for Spurs, that you've got this character who isn't, afraid to talk to authority like that?
Yes, although I think it is a slightly different situation at Juventus than at Spurs, given that he played for Juventus in the past. He was assistant manager under Andrea Pirlo as well. So he probably felt like, you guys know what I am, you guys know what I'm about, you guys know my capabilities. This is the time to back me. And in the summer, they did ultimately make the decision to back him. They signed a number of players that were on loan there last year, which kind of tied them up financially, but they still did invest huge wages into Jonathan David from Lille, into Lois Openda, who arrived from RB Leipzig. Edinger Grover was signed permanently, Michel Di Gregorio, Lloyd Kelly, the former Bournemouth and Newcastle defender as well. Results were disappointing, I think most Juventus fans would say. Kenan Yildiz was really the only shining bright light of their first half of the season, and Luciano Spalletti, since arriving there, replacing Tudor, has kind of overshone him with a similar squad. So that isn't the most promising thing, but I think in terms of what happens in the summer will be a different conversation, and he may well feel that he's entitled to ask for whatever he wants in the summer if he rights the ship and maybe progresses a little bit further in the Champions League. I don't think most observers would think that Spurs have much of a chance of going further than the quarterfinals, but you never know. You never know. There's always a dark horse in the competition. After finishing fourth, they can carry a lot of confidence with their Champions League form. But I just don't think he's in a position to be demanding too much right now, and Spurs won't want to look too far ahead. They've got so many managerial appointments seemingly pretty wrong. It's a massive summer of investment. You saw Ange Postecoglou on a famous podcast yesterday talking about the transfer targets that he was suggesting and that he didn't necessarily feel backed enough. Spurs have to get this summer recruitment right and build, no matter who is the manager, whether it's Tudor or not.